Alex is a top producer at George Mason Mortgage in Fairfax County. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning.
Alex is a little bit unusual in the sense, and because of that, Alex, I'm looking forward to interviewing you. Alex is a bit unusual in the sense that Alex does consistently around $100 million a year and has for some time, but appears on nobody's list. And it's interesting. I interview almost exclusively by referrals, and there are a number of top producers out there in this country that do not appear in any of the established lists, not well known, but within their market area, they're very well known. And you would know this, but I got referred to you by Andy Lang. But also, after I got referred to you, I must have talked to 6 or 7 heavy producers in your market area, people who all knew about you, all knew your reputation, and actually in your area, you're highly respected. You may not know that, but you are. Anyway, I thought we'd start the interview by me asking, where you came from. Did you grow up in the Washington area, and how you got into business, and how many years ago?
Well, let's see. I actually started the mortgage business in 1986, but on the computer side of things. I didn't get into production until it was 91 or 92.
What do you mean by the computer side?
I designed mortgage banking software. I started out with First Washington Mortgage, and we designed
Paul Rabchek.
Paul Rabchek designed his system, the home system, and we actually then marketed it. And we only had one customer. We sold it to Long and Foster's mortgage subsidiary, Prosperity Mortgage, at the time.
Yeah, I just talked to Herb Engler yesterday. He's running it now.
I can't remember who ran it back when.
Probably Terry Rowland, maybe?
No, this was...
Pam Kearns?
No.
She's the original.
Late 80s. I can't remember the gentleman's name. But nonetheless, we sold it to them, and I was also trying to sell it to Dominion Bankshares Mortgage at the time. And they were courting an IBM-based system, and my system ran on a Hewlett-Packard mini mainframe. So I ended up going to Dominion to implement the system that they had purchased from a company in Atlanta. And we ended up basically rewriting it. Didn't do much. Wouldn't even print a loan application at the time. And ended up selling that package back to the original developer in Atlanta. And about the same time, Dominion had a salary freeze on, and I had won some awards for the things I had done, but I wasn't getting any more money.
But you got an award.
You get an Employee of the Year award, but you get no money.
Right.
What do you really have? Keep the award.
Right.
But my wife was a loan officer at the time, and she was very successful, and she kept trying to get me to come over to her side of the house, and she worked for Dominion Bankshares Mortgage, and work with her as a team. And so I eventually did that in the early 90s, and then after our second child was born, she stayed home, and I kept doing what we were doing.
I find it kind of interesting because you work for George Mason Mortgage, which is not a large entity. I know you got bought out. Didn't you get bought out a couple of years ago? Or
the parent company, George Mason Bank, was bought out by United Bank a couple of years ago. George Mason Mortgage, actually, a lot of companies claim to be number one, but TRW has a service that they provide. You get quarterly reports, and actually shows the rankings of all the lenders in Northern Virginia based on settlements, recordings at the courthouse. And we've actually, I believe, going on 3.5, maybe even 4 years now, been number one in Northern Virginia. So we have a fairly significant operation in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, that was Bernie Kleinberg that started that,
George Mason Bank.
Yeah, kind of a legend in his own time, and who's now left, but left rich, I might add. But
I think he's comfortable.
Yeah, he's very comfortable right now. But I knew him back when. Anyway, why do you think your company is? Normally, I don't start off this way, but why do you think your company is so successful?
I'm going to have to owe it a lot to Gene Merrill, who's the president and CEO of the company. He's been president of 3 companies in the area. He came into the area, was recruited by Dominion Bankshares Mortgage before I was ever at Dominion, and took that company to number one in the area. And then he went on to start Atlantic Coast Mortgage, took that company to #1 in the area at the time, and then he came here to George Mason. So we have, I think the leadership has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I agree.
And, of course, Mr. Merrill has always, a lot of people say you have to spend money to make money, but not everybody really does that. Seems to be a popular statement, but when it comes to going out, recruiting loan officers, paying people fair compensation, and spending money to make the type of environment people want to work in, Mr. Merrill's the person you want to work for.
How many offices do you have in your market area?
Oh, goodness.
The reason I'm saying that is because you are dominant, and yet you're not a large. I don't even think you would characterize yourself as a major regional player.
We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 branches in Northern Virginia, one's in West Virginia, and one's in Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Or, excuse me, 2 are in Maryland. So 4.
So you have about 10 offices altogether. Are you primarily a broker, or are you servicing?
We don't service.
Sell everything.
We have second trust products that the bank takes from us,
mm-hmm.
and every once in a while you keep a portfolio loan, but we sell 99.9% of our product.
I see. Well, let's get back to you, the focus of the interview here. When you started off, where did you get your business?
Well, primarily builders. As I mentioned, I started working with my wife years ago, and she was, 100% builder business. And so I started working on the builder side and was also calling on real estate offices. And kind of going back to your question about why we've been successful, one of the niche markets that my boss has, Mr. Merrill, had really targeted early on in his career was the builder side of things. So that's why I did come to George Mason, because that was what I did a lot of. 60 to 70% of my business was builder, and Mr. Merrill having a background in the builder side of things, that's who I wanted to work for. So the builder business can be a tremendous boom when you break into an account, because there's a tremendous pipeline of loans that you have an opportunity to work on. Most builders will only pay incentives to closing costs if you use one of their approved lenders. And sometimes that list is one. Sometimes, I've been on builder lists that have 12 lenders. So,
mm-hmm.
But at least you get a shot at these deals.
But of course it begs the question on, because builders also can be notoriously difficult to work with for reasons, most of them legitimate, like not wanting a construction loan to roll over into the next month. And also they can be testy just because they're builders. And it begs the question on why you're so successful at it for such a long period of time. Being in the business since 1990, in the scheme of things, I guess, has some longevity. But on the other hand, it's not an enormous amount of time. And you started producing, because I know what you've done, you started producing pretty fast and pretty heavily from the get-go. And so I guess my point is, how did you become successful in dealing with builders? What did you do differently than your contemporaries?
I don't think this is rocket science. I really think it's just a strong work ethic. My first branch manager, Mike Zell, who's the current branch manager of our Lake Ridge office, when I first started working for him, he said, "Alex," he goes, "remember one thing: if you can't be good, be there."
Mm-hmm.
And it's just always something that kind of stuck with me. And it's just, he's saying you got to be out in the field. You have to have a presence. And I was always out in the field. I mean, in the beginning, there wasn't a day where I wasn't out calling on accounts.
And how did you call on your accounts? Were you calling on the job sites themselves?
Yeah, you call on the job sites. You have to also work the corporate side of the house. None of that you wouldn't work as frequently. I mean, you throw a breakfast function for all the sales agents on a Monday and get everybody together. That's one way to do it. Try to find a reason to work with the corporate folks as well, because they ultimately are the deciding powers on whether you get on the list. But you need to also have a presence out in the field, because it's the agents you want pulling for you on their morning sales meeting. So it's important to get to the agents and just be in front of them, give them great customer service, and provide them with various printouts on the various sales prices and different programs in the community, and some handouts that they can give potential customers. And take them breakfast, take them lunch. The sales agents I've worked with for a number of years have become close friends of mine. And we go to dinner. We go. It's gone to the theater with one sales agent. Just different things. Gone fishing with various agents. So different agents obviously have different hobbies, and you try to find a fit. And at first it's a lot of salesmanship, but then over a period of time it's just developed into friendships.
And that's what you would recommend out there. The reason I say that is that there's kind of two schools of thought where you develop a relationships that develop really into friendships, and where you kind of keep it on a professional basis. Both have been successful. I'm not sure I'd argue for one or the other. They both work. But you seem to have gone the route where you develop very intense relationships over a period of time.
Well, I've done both. A lot of them are, some are intense and some are professional, but there's that other element there. And every relationship is going to be unique in its own right, and you kind of find what fits. And some agents are really tough to get into their group, where they're going to refer you a loan or two. And
why do you think that is?
Well, the good news is that there are some agents that are incredibly loyal, and those are the toughest ones to break into, because before you there was somebody else getting their business. And while they might be the toughest one to break into, they will be the most rewarding once you've broken into their business. And the agents, no question, the agents that have toughest time winning them over and proving that you can be a good loan officer and can be responsive and can give great customer service to their customers. Those are the ones, once you kind of break down the door, so to speak, or open the door or get a crack, that relationship will last longer, because they are incredibly loyal.
Mm-hmm. Is it a process getting into these agents?
And certainly, sometimes it's very easy, and most of the time it's very difficult.
What do you mean by that for those listeners out there?
Well, again,
the process, I mean.
Again, you have your folks that the sales agents that have their loyalties already, not just on the builder side, but even in retail offices. There's always loyalties that are going to be established before you get there. And sometimes there's a lot of luck. You just happen to be there on a day that one of their other loans went bad. And that's kind of going back to what Mike Zell said. If you can't be good, be there. It's real important. It's amazing when you're out in the field how you come up with a loan or two just by being in the right place at the right time. And other agents are kind of just off the get-go are more willing to talk to you, and you can establish a rapport a little bit more easily than you can with others. And, you just keep showing up, and hopefully over a period of time you kind of wear them down, and they feel guilty enough to where they throw you a bone, mm-hmm. and you get your first loan. And normally that's a tough one. That's a loan someone can't do, someone else can't do, and you end up having to try to kind of earn your stripes with that loan. And it's a little harder now, because in the old days you could take a loan and it might be credit impaired, and you'd have someone write a letter, what happened, what were the extenuating circumstances that led to this period of time where they couldn't pay all their bills on time. And you take that letter and you kind of I always make my customers write the letter. I wouldn't write it for them.
Yeah, of course not.
And but
remember, this guy passed a legal test today, Alex.
But then you take it and you'd work it. You'd kind of throw in keywords that would catch an underwriter's ear.
Sure.
So I used to like to get the draft, and then I would make my recommendations as to how about this and how about that. And it wasn't at all bending the truth. It was more just kind of throwing in keywords, and I always wanted them to end it with well, why is now different? What can you do now to make this to ensure us that you're going to make your payments on time? So again, that was in the old days before credit scores. Credit scores has taken some of that out of that, because with credit scores, unfortunately some investors are this score or better, and that's it. And so the letter doesn't really have an impact as much as it used to.
If it doesn't, and I'd like to interject, what can you do with a credit score that's, let's say, a marginal or just below marginal score to make it better?
Well, there's a difference in the kind of business with relation to your question. In other words, on a spot deal, a deal that's closing in 60 days, there's sometimes, unfortunately, there's just not enough time to get anything done. Because when you dispute any issues with those three repositories, Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, they have by law 30 days to work on those disputes and resolve them. When you're doing builder business, you have lots of time, particularly now with the builders so backed up. Deliveries are 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, so you have plenty of time. But you take a look at these credit reports, and you'd be amazed at how you can get the scores manipulated, and just by kind of knowing what to do. And there's no book out there that'll tell you what to do on a credit report to get the scores up. We know that certain factors go into calculating the score. We know the history, your payment history. We know the amount of overall credit you have is important. I mean, if you have 20 credit cards and they all have $3,000 lines of credit, even though you might only be using one or two, that's still a lot of credit cards out there. What percentage of your overall credit are you using? And what's the history in terms of the seasoning of your credit? Is it a new account, 24 months, 5 months, or is it a well-established account that's 3 or 4, 5, 6 years old? So we know all those things go in, but we don't know how they're weighted. So kind of just over a period of time, I've just gotten into a mode where I have a letter. At the beginning, I was just kind of testing it and seeing what worked and what didn't work. But a combination of having people close down old accounts that are dormant, a combination of obviously paying off debts, disputing items. After 24 months, most of the creditors out there put things to archive.
Right.
And yet, if you dispute an item with the three repositories, they have 30 days to resolve it, or they have to take it off.
Right. A lot of people, I absolutely want to stop here because this is a very valid point. There's, as I tell everybody, there's no interview I do where something new and dramatic doesn't kind of jump out, even though a lot of people may do it. And this is one right here, and the listeners ought to be paying real close attention to this. This is kind of an obscure fact that's not known by a lot of people. I happen to know it. That's why I'm stopping you here. And I just wonder if you would expound on that, because that is real important for those people in the builder business as far as disputing something. It's worth its weight in gold.
Well, what happens is you have folks, and by law, if a late payment is not 30 days or more late, it shouldn't be on a credit report. But some creditors will report if it's 15, 20 days late. So you have customers when I draft these letters for them, and I say, do you remember whether this was actually 30 days late? And they'll, some of them will say yes, that definitely was, and some will say, well, I don't remember. And if they don't remember, I typically will go through and my letter that I draft for my borrowers will go through and list accounts that are already closed, because you want to tell the repositories, here are the accounts that are closed, here are the accounts that should show zero balances or balances of X, because all of these things go into calculating the score. With respect to late payments, you might dispute, say, hey, look, I don't believe that was a 30-day late payment, and you can list the ones that you don't think were actually 30 days late, or collections that you've never even heard of. This collection never happened. I don't know what this is.
And in many cases, this is true. I mean, we all know the horror stories that are out there now with accounts, and now the worst of it, and I wonder if you've actually seen it, but I think the worst practices now are companies that have really good accounts and good credit histories on their people that aren't reporting them. They're afraid they're going to get snaked by another company. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's a mess out there.
I don't, I love the credit score. I hate the credit score. It's really a love-hate relationship, because when you have a great credit score, you can make a lot of good things happen on a marginal loan in terms of, if they have high ratios or whatever. But the good credit score can really make up for a lot of things. But when you have a bad credit score, and I had an example yesterday. I had someone that had 2 late payments, but their credit scores were all around 640. And they had one credit card account that was maxed out, but other than that, they had relatively low debt.
They still had 640?
Yeah, and it was right in the 640 range. Was the middle score. Mm-hmm. And I was just looking at that credit report, and here's a classic credit report that doesn't make sense. And again, we don't know what goes into making that score. We have an idea, but I was looking at that one saying, I don't really, my magic that I think I can perform on a lot of credit scores, I don't know if I can really help these folks out and get that score changed. Other than there were a lot of old dormant accounts, which will be what I target, closing a lot of these old dormant accounts down, and making sure that they get not only closed, but a letter goes to the repository stating they are closed. Because a lot of these creditors just take so long to get this information updated with TRW, Equifax, or not TRW, but Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So by disputing the late payments, a lot of times, even if something is possibly true, if it's over 24 months and they can't get to it on archive, a lot of times it'll fall off. Mm-hmm. I'm not encouraging my customers to lie. I ask them, but if they don't recall, then I want to dispute it.
Well, there's at that point, there is a legitimate dispute, because most people, after a couple of years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I mean, they honestly can't remember what the heck they did in May of 1994. They just don't remember.
Absolutely. So I've had great results getting scores up, but again, it does take time, and if you're doing a quick turnaround deal and closing 2 or 3 weeks, it's very difficult. Very difficult.
Right, exactly.
Unless you get the borrowers on the phone and they deal directly with the credit repositories on the phone. If you can break through the phone mail jail, Congress has put some pressure on these repositories to start moving. There was an article in the Washington Post recently mm-hmm. stating that there was a class action suit that involved these very issues. So,
right, and I think they will improve. They paid pretty heavy fines, and the way these settlements are all written, they don't admit guilt. But then, in the cases that you're referring to, they've agreed to answer their phones on time. It sounds like a silly thing, but as you well know in this business, they weren't answering their phones. People would call 50 times and couldn't get through.
No, that was the recurring theme when I was hearing back from my customers, that when we're trying to get things done fast. But if you're trying to get something turned around in 2 or 3 weeks, there's no other way to do it than by just getting on the phones and camping out until you do talk to someone.
Mm-hmm. When the process starts, when you get a call and get a loan, what do you do? Do you meet with them face-to-face? Do you do stuff by mail? How do you conduct your business once the call has come that you're going to get the deal, or someone is calling you?
It really varies. A lot of the initial discussions take place, on the telephone. Email, of course, now is popular. People will just send me an email asking about certain information. Of course, I'd rather talk to someone on the phone because I want to develop a rapport with them, and I think the phone is a better way to do that. Email is something that I like using after I've already established my rapport and have a loan in the door, and sometimes that can facilitate communication between me and my processor and the borrowers. But eventually I like to meet with people. I mean, the initial discussions take place on the phone, but I really find it interesting that a lot of people don't actually meet with their customers. We were actually interviewing myself and the assistant, I co-branch managed the office here in Northern Virginia with Ed Dean, and we were interviewing somebody recently who was a top producer of another company, and he said he rarely meets with his customers. And I'm just the opposite. Not only do I want to meet with them, but I probably take one of the longer loan applications in the company. And it's not that we're sitting there filling out forms the whole time. Typically, I've Federal Expressed or emailed my forms or faxed them ahead of time. I like my customers to come in and have them filled out in advance. Even with all that done in advance, I still probably take one of the longer loan applications. But
how do you do that?
I'm talking about football. I'm talking about fishing. I'm talking mm-hmm. about kids. And that's what I enjoy doing. I'm not just doing that because I want to win them over. It's just I get in. I don't like talking about business the moment they sit down. I like talking about anything but business.
Okay.
And people have lots of interests out there, whether it's travel or a hobby or sports or I try to find a common ground. And my favorite line is I ask people about college football, and if they went to Florida State, I tell them, the COA says I can't discriminate, but there's nothing in there about Florida State. I don't know if we can do business, And I joke around about that, but it's also just a way to kind of break the ice.
Humor has its place. They once did. I never forgot it years ago because at times I think I had a pretty good sense of humor. Where they did a list of the top 10 things that women look for in men, and by foreign, you would think that looks would be way up there. In reality, it was like number 8. But the thing that women look for most in a man, by far and away, was a sense of humor. And I think you can extrapolate from that a bit that people like to deal with people that they like. And having a good sense of humor and joking around and stuff like that, it really does break the ice because this is the largest purchase they've ever made. A lot of them are scared to death.
Well, it's certainly that, but I'll tell you one of the big wins I've had, I think, when dealing with the borrower that's going to be in process down the road, the borrower that's buying the new home that's going to be built in 6, 7, 8 months, is if I've established that rapport up front, I am so I'm less likely to lose that loan down the road. And when you do an application through the mail and you've established no rapport whatsoever with a customer, you're just a company out there. And with the internet nowadays and just the aggressive marketing other mortgage companies are doing, it's important down the road that they still want to do business with me. And I feel it's an advantage to having met with them. Now that's wreaked havoc on my life at times because I spent a lot of evenings here for a lot of years taking two applications every evening. Just so I can meet with them, because it's certainly hard when you're doing a lot of volume to meet everybody during the day and return calls and be responsive. So I prefer early morning appointments. I prefer evening appointments. So that's a disadvantage to trying to do it the way I do it, but that's the way I feel more comfortable doing.
Do you go to closings?
I do not. No.
Mm-hmm. I expect you to say that just because of the volume you do.
Yeah, no, I know some loan officers do that, and you do what you have to do to go out there and establish a pipeline of business. And if it means sitting in on some settlements just to get to know an agent, I think it's a great idea. It's something I've not done, but I know of a couple loan officers that work here that go to an occasional settlement. And typically you do that more often when you're first trying to woo an agent, and but once you get busy, that would be impossible if you're doing high volume to go to closings.
Mm-hmm. What about in this? When you take this loan app, are you looking within a specific period of time to get a pre-approval back to that builder? Do you have a goal?
Yeah, my system is kind of fairly simple. I take a very good loan app. I take a lot of notes. I fill out everything.
By hand, by the way?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
We're about to go to a laptop origination system, and so of course we can do point of sale approvals, and that's the way the industry's going. But as I take a loan app, even when they bring it in filled out, I still go through it as if I were taking it, because things, you'll see something, it brings up a question, and these questions are important with respect to the processing of the loan, and that's why I take notes. It's amazing the loan officers that I've worked with over the years that just hand in a loan, and mine, I'm probably more anal than most, but mine are in Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac submission order. They're echo-fastened in the file. The notes are on the left. How I calculated the ratios are there. So my processor, when she gets it, isn't looking at it and going, where did he get this back ratio? I mean, she knows exactly what debts, what income I'm using. Notes that are specific to the loan, regarding gift or payoff of debts or sale of homes. Just information that's important. And so that loan goes to the processor. I want the loan back, preferably within 24 hours, with a full three-marriage credit report. Now, this is changing a little bit because with DU and LP, if it's a loan that is going to an investor that allows DU or LP, then it's easy. Then I would just have it run right then. but right now we're in an ARM market, and not all the ARM investors will allow us to, to have delegated underwriting with DU or LP. So a lot of times you have to send it out to a PMI company or whatever. So in those loans, you're still running credit reports. And then the loan comes right back to me, whether the LP was run or the full credit report, and then it's got to come back to my desk. And I don't want to say I don't trust my process because I have great processes, but I don't want them to make the decision of issuing pre-qual. That comes back to me. I want to see the line, type up the pre-qual, and the pre-qual goes out, and that should happen within anywhere from 2 to 4 days.
So it's all very quick.
It's all very quick, and it can be quicker if it has to be. I mean, I like to get a full credit report, but sometimes you're working with in-files if you have to. If an agent needs an immediate decision, we work off the in-file. It'll be a lot easier once we're back in a fixed rate market, because then, of course, you can use DU and LP on everything. Right now, it's a little trickier because of the ARM market.
Well, when you say ARMs, what you're excluding things like that I think would be in this kind of an interim market in terms of interest rates. Are you finding any people attracted to 5/1s or 723s or?
Not 723s, but definitely 5/1s, and even of late the 3/1 has become popular. So as these rates continue to go up, and there's so little advantage between the 7 and the 10-year ARMs and the 30-year fixed right now. You get a little bit of a bang on the 5, and then of course the biggest advantage is on the 3.
Sure.
And for a while there was a pretty good spread between the 5-year and the 30-year, but that has shrunk. So right now. But right now, the 5/1 is definitely the dominant loan program people are going to.
There's something interesting that's happening right now. Normally, we don't time date these interviews because, in a sense, they should be timeless. But I do find it interesting because of the market here, where they have the Fed may raise interest rates, bump them as much as a half a point in the next day or two. Do you find that your buyers out there are starting to get a little bit nervous on rates? And how do you handle that, more importantly?
Well, there's no question we've been busy. Every loan officer in this office has been running around the last couple of days because, your customers are calling in. They're concerned. Should we be doing extended locks if they're buying new construction? If they're not doing new construction, they're within 60 days. I'm pretty sure we have everybody locked up. Customers are pretty savvy nowadays. And, when I first got in this business, it took a while for rates to change. Just things happen a lot more slowly. But with the internet and the news services, things happen so fast. And of course, the bond market has already anticipated what the Fed's going to do. The bond market's already reacted in such a way that rates have gone up significantly in the last 2 weeks. And so, as long as the Fed makes their half-point change, we're probably not going to get whacked today. Of course, you never know what they're going to say as they announce it either. If they point to a not-so-bright future, then we could get whacked some more.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen, though. What about extended locks? Could you talk a bit about extended locks?
Well, extended locks are very...
Without anything proprietary. We're not interested in anything proprietary to your company.
No, I mean, extended locks are important when you're in a market like this and doing new construction. You have to have investors that will give you that kind of feature, and most of them will charge for that. And we have a couple that will go out 9 months. Most will go out at least 4 or 6 months. But of course, mostly there are charges involved with that. And we have one investor that will give free 120-day locks with a float down.
With a float down. Mm-hmm. What about beyond 4 months? What are the typical charges you're seeing in general between, let's say, a 5 and 9 month extended lock?
Well, the 5 month lock generally is 3/4 of a point. 6 month locks generally around a point. Those are non-refundable. Those are contrary to what customers believe, that's just extra money we're making. That's passed on right to the
Sure, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Very few will go out 9 months, but the 9 month lock is generally a 1.5.
Do you find builders are starting to buy some forwards now in this market?
Years back they would.
Of course.
But the builders aren't concerned right now because there's so much demand, and that's why kind of time stamping this, I think, is important because this is a different time. Builders are holding lotteries to see who gets what lot right now. This is an extraordinary time in this business, and when times are slower, though, and when rates are going up, builders are going to have to look at buying forwards again. But right now, that's not the market.
Do you think we'll get back to that, though?
I'm sure there'll be a day where rates are going up and the markets are slow enough to where builders feel they have to spend some money for some insurance. Mm-hmm. I know earlier on in my career, one builder in particular was very wise to buy it forward, and we had people, a couple $1 million at 7.5% when rates were pushing 9%, and of course, there's no question it made a huge difference to him in selling his homes because he had that 7.5 and nobody could touch him.
Right. But I think in today's environment, I think you hit the nail on the head for those people out there doing business with builders. You've been around long enough. I've been around 3 times longer than you business-wise. That builders, after a while, when they see all these forward commitments, this money going down the drain and not being taken down, they get a little jaded on it, and especially the last couple of years. I think they've been reluctant as a group to put money into forwards.
No question, it has diminished. But again, I do believe part of that is just the overwhelming demand for homes right now. They just don't feel they have to.
I'd like to change subjects on you because we don't have a lot of time left. And I wondered if you would discuss, I'll throw the word out, the psyche of the builder. I'm not sure it's the appropriate word I'm looking for, but I wonder if you would just talk for our listeners out there, loan officers maybe that don't have that much experience or would like to get into the builder side, personalities in general of builders and good points and bad points and what to watch out for. Because they are different from realtors is really where I'm coming from.
They are. I've been very fortunate. I've worked with builders that over a period of time, of course, I've established great relationships with. And unfortunately, lately, of course, the trend, and I guess this should be a warning for everybody that's about to look at builder business as a way to go. If you lose a realtor, of course, you lose a little bit of your business. But if you lose a builder and you've done a lot of business with that builder over a period of time, of course, you can lose a lot of business at one time. And builders right now are trending toward opening their own mortgage companies. And that's just a sign of the times because, everyone wants to have their own title company. They want their own mortgage company. So when a builder gets big enough, they are going to open their own mortgage company. That's what we're seeing right now. So even with the relationships I've had, certainly some of the builders that have opened their own mortgage companies will give me an opportunity to work with that mortgage company because of the background and the relationship over a number of years. But so far I've stayed put. I've stayed George Mason. I really don't have any desire to go anywhere else. But it's nice to know that the builders, you should get into the psyche of my relationships, that they do come to me and say, how about, here's an opportunity, because they'd like to see me stay affiliated with their organization, even if it's not through George Mason. But, the builders, they probably have a reputation for being pretty tough. And I can't say I've never seen that, but I've always done a good job. I've never had a rejected loan, so I've never seen the wrath of the builder.
You're a lucky man indeed.
I kind of brag that once I issue a pre-qualification letter, I've never had someone meet all the conditions of my pre-qualification letter and had a loan rejected, and that's just something I kind of boast about. That's why that pre-qualification process is very important. In fact, even for a while there, when my wife stayed home with the kids, she was kind of my checks and balance system. After I would prepare a pre-qualification letter, literally she'd come in maybe 4 hours 1 week and just review pre-quals. Because it's always good to have a different set of eyes looking at it. And just to catch something you might have missed. And I consider my pre-qual a commitment. And if you meet those conditions on that letter, you're going to get the loan. So, not having rejected loans at the end, you can avoid a lot of confrontation with the builder. But once you mess up a loan here or two with a builder, you put yourself in a position where you're going to have you're either going to be kicked off the list, or you're going to make life very difficult for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Builders can be a very unforgiving lot unless you have that relationship, and even then, it's a business to them.
It is a business, and there's a saying that there's in a lot of businesses, you're only as good as your last loan, and they tend to forget all the loans that you closed, maybe when the deck wasn't done or the sod wasn't down, all the exceptions you made, holding a lock for an extra day or two or three. Sometimes builders forget all that and want you to concentrate on some other issue. But when you look at the volume of business you can get from a builder, you're going to have to bend. If you're not flexible, if you work for a mortgage company that can't extend a lock or can't close without a RUP, not that that's our goal to close loans without RUPs, but if it's a reputable builder and you're going to get a RUP within 24 hours, you make exceptions, and you have to have that kind of flexibility to have a long-term relationship with any builder.
I was talking to Mark Stamp, who is president of Greater Atlantic Mortgage, and they've reached a point where they've gone to some of their investors, and on some of the stuff that they deem to be minor, like putting grass and some of the other small things, they've really just gotten their investors to just sign off on not setting aside escrows on it anymore. They just feel that the value is in there, the people have enough down, and why put everybody, builders, through a lot of heartache over this stuff?
Well, there's no question that we've gotten a lot easier to work with. Our investors have gotten a lot easier to work with over a period of years when it comes to new construction. So
I remember years ago, for those listeners out there that are kind of young and haven't been through some of the wars, where getting escrows for grass, we're 2 times. I used to have a couple investors wanted 2.5 times the value on it. Stuff that's crazy today.
Yeah, Fannie and Freddie, and it seems everyone else, they still want that 1.5 times. But if you try to do a VHDA loan, a VHDA won't allow escrows at all unless you've just gone through a winter storm and the grass isn't down. So there's still some inflexibility out there, but for the most part, the industry has adapted and changed for the better.
Yeah, most of the loans you're doing out there, are you doing any govies at all with builders?
Sure, you do govies. I'd say most of my pipeline is conventional, but I still have a certain element of FHA deals out there. And that's another way, I probably should have mentioned earlier when you talked about how do you get in with a builder. Yeah, there's a cost associated with getting these government approvals with builders. And if you go in there and you go and propose to a builder that you'll absorb the cost of the FHA approval or the VA approval, that's one way to not necessarily lock up all the business, but to at least get on the list of the approved lenders. And that's just...
What about do you get any 1023s? Do you get any conventional approvals?
You mean 1020? You mean the condo approvals, 1028?
Yeah, mm-hmm. That's one.
Yes, we do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's important to have a company or a shop behind you that can do this sort of thing?
There are. You mentioned Mark Stam. He has always been a big player in the condo market because he had a person work directly for him that did nothing but condo and PUD approvals, and I think that was a big benefit to Mark and his operation. There are subcontractors out there in this area, Barbara Spissler, Kathy Kerr, that do that very thing. Debbie Rice, who used to work for Mark Stam.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And now she's on her own, but they provide that service, and they're excellent. All three of them have always done a good job for us, and that can be a big benefit.
When you say it's a big benefit, it's because the builder just doesn't have the ability to do it himself, and they're looking just to job it out?
Yeah, that's a lot of overhead for the builder to have someone that specializes in that. And, there's very few builders are doing that much production to where they can justify having one person that does all that. So a builder can really, mortgage company can really help out by getting that done. and with people like Barb and Kathy and Debbie Rice, it's not that hard.
When you're dealing with builders, do you socialize with them? Have you developed social relationships with them over a period of time?
Yes, with the agents, of course. There's a lot of socializing that goes on. With corporate, some, not as much. At least I haven't, and I know of other loan officers that have been more involved with people at the corporate level. So it just depends on the relationship. So it's every relationship you have out there is going to be unique, and your contact may be someone in a corporate office, or maybe down at the sales level. Yeah, you try to attack both. I mean, you try to know the players in both levels, but you probably will tend to migrate toward one or the other with respect to how you socialize.
Mm-hmm. What about on the agent side that are on the job sites? Do you find a lot of them are working for realtors? Long & Foster is a good example that has a very large new home division, and obviously would like to get their loans back to their mortgage sub. Do you find a lot of that out there?
I don't deal with any Long & Foster New Homes agents. I know Long & Foster has a New Homes division. A lot of builders, of course, hire their own agents and have their own staff. And then there are builders that go through there and work through Long & Foster New Homes, or Ken Murphy and Associates is also a good one. There are several. And, and sometimes Ken Murphy and Associates or Long & Foster New Homes can try to help get you on the approved list, and sometimes the builder's calling the shots, and the builder's mandating who's going to be on the list and who's not going to be on the list.
Mm-hmm. How many people, you keep referring to these lists for our listeners out there in your market area, do you find these lists are they expensive? I know you alluded to the fact that some of them could have up to 10 or 12 people, but in general, are they pretty restricted to 2 or 3 people? Is that the way builders?
In general, it is 2 or 3. The one builder that had 12 on there at one time.
Yeah, that does sound a little excessive.
It was, and we still captured a majority of that business, but it was much tougher because, it's tougher on the buyers too, because they end up calling 12 lenders instead of 3, and their minds are spinning by the time they've done that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you find that having the relationships with the people on the job site, do you find that your goal was to get that first call and quotes?
Well, certainly, when that agent hands out the list that the builder mandates, it would certainly be nice if the agent put in a plug for me and mentioned maybe that I do most of the business in the community and I'm very responsive.
Does that happen?
Sure. You hope that the agent, over a period of time, if you've served him or her well, that they'll say a good thing for you, give you a good plug. So, but it is important. I do think getting the first call is hugely important. Being responsive, getting right back to that person when they call in, being the first person that talks to them. Invest some time in that call.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned that getting right back to them leads me into a tangential area, and that is response time. Do you consider response time to be way up there in your priority list?
It's huge. The more time, the faster you can get back to them, and the more time you can invest into that first conversation, I think has a determining impact on that loan. I mean, you're going to greatly enhance the odds of winning that loan over if you make that investment.
What's interesting is that most people that I interview, before we even get into the interview, there's probably 5 or 6 phone calls that have transpired. And I have to say, in the times that I've called you, I've never called you when you haven't picked up the phone yourself, which is a bit unusual for the amount of times that we chatted.
Well, I wish you've been lucky.
Well, I'd like to think you're just being modest at this point.
No, John,
I'd like to think there's a little more to that.
I answer the phone every time I'm standing in my office and I'm not on the phone. I'm answering the phone. No.
Not everybody does it. You'd be surprised to hear in the real world,
no.
Which is my point, that they don't do it. They go into their voicemail.
Well, I've had certainly. I'd be a liar if I didn't say a customer complained about always getting voicemail. But it's certainly not because I'm I'm avoiding phone calls or procrastinating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I try to get every call. I hate a message going into voicemail, because then you try to get back and then you're playing phone tag. You know, if you can take that call right when it's coming in, everybody wins.
Right,
but
exactly.
sometimes it's impossible, and you know, I'm here on the phone, you know, good part of the day.
Do you work a lot of nights? You alluded to the fact you like to take apps early in the morning. You're an early morning guy. We're doing this interview at 7:30, and you and I are both up earlier than that, so we could have even done it earlier than that. But you're an early morning person. Do you do a lot of night interviews now?
Yes, I do. I mentioned earlier, you know, for me, that responsiveness that we just talked about is key, and you cannot be responsive if you're doing high volume of business by taking a lot of loan applications during the day. You have to, at least the way I do it, is I take them early morning, and I try to take them in the evening. Again, that's created some difficulties with family issues, and I now have an assistant that helps out, so we try to split up the evenings.
Do you pay this assistant yourself? Okay.
Well, the company picks up a small share, and then I pay the larger share.
Right, which is kind of the way it works. But at some point, I know that business load, especially with the numbers you do, it can almost become crushing unless you have an assistant. I've done a lot of interviews with people who have assistants for the simple reason they've just reached a point where they cannot give that 100% customer service and do everything and create a database and mail out their letters and do all the follow-up. So it's become impossible. So they move it up to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something I should have known a long time ago, and it has really helped me out. But to get back to your question regarding evening appointments, I have if I took appointments during the day or took a lot of them, I would be really my customer service and responsiveness would really be suffering, and so I've chosen to try to push appointments early in the morning or late in the evening.
Do you do them? And this I think is going to have to be our final question. Do you do them in the office in general? You try and get them to your place?
I try. I'm very fortunate. Our office is just located in a great location. We're just in a major corridor, and going west. And of course, western Fairfax County, Loudoun County are the growth areas of Northern Virginia. And so, a lot of people are moving right up 66 and out Route 50, and that's exactly where our office is. So it's very easy for people to get to me. If I was calling in Alexandria or Arlington, and some of our loan officers do, they tend to take more loan applications in those areas. So, you do what you have to do.
Right, exactly. Well, look, I kind of like to end it on that point. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to our listeners. I thought it's been very insightful. I, in particular, really liked your part on the credit scoring. I think there's really valuable advice there for the listeners out there. And anyway, thanks so much, Alex, and it was nice talking to you today.
Well, thank you very much.
Right.